Yeah, well, telcos are bleeding. Let's find out from an individual who was also at that event yesterday. Engineer Benga Adibayo is the chairman, Association of Licensed Telecoms Operators of Nigeria. That's ALTON. He joins us virtually now. Thank you so much for joining us, Engineer Adibayo. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So both the managing director of MTN Nigeria and the CEO of financial derivatives company, the organizer of that event, they painted like pictures that are not so pleasant when it comes to the telcos. Tell us as an insider, what's the reality now?
Absolutely not. The situation is very bad. We are not in a good position as an industry considering the economic headwinds. The fact remains that we operate in the same socio-economic environment as other sectors. But unfortunately, the dynamics of our industry as it is, the cost of providing services today is not reflective in the end user charges. And therefore, it's very difficult for people to have guarantee or assurance on the return on their investment. And so the needed investment to drive the sector is not coming, particularly what is required to drive the base infrastructure, which is mostly the infrastructure of the infracos and that of the mobile network operators. And we're saying that something has to be done both in terms of policy and in terms of enabling environment in order to remove the bottleneck that we currently have so we can have a healthy industry. Given what we are facing today, it's very, very difficult for providers to continue to provide services without hindrance.
So I do know that the telcos, they proposed to increase tariff at some point in the midst of all the macroeconomic headwinds. I think that was not approved. Is that what might be, even if it's a short-term solution?
It's one of them. It's one of the elements, because other than that, the cost of providing services today is high. Input is very high. Energy is very high. Logistics cost is high. And a number of other elements that the industry is dealing with. Also, we also have the cost of governance, cost of compliance with government directives and regulation. We have issue of multiple taxation and regulation. In response to that, you have behavior of public actors going to seal up telecom site until the premium is paid. You have revenue collection agencies going to close offices and they arrest staff until the premium is paid. All of this create very hostile operating environment. And you know today the cost of energy, particularly the cost of diesel, which is faced mostly by our infrastructure providers, what this will cost today and the kind of theft we are seeing on different locations is quite concerning. So first you have the high cost of logistics or delivering diesel to site. Then you have the high rate of vandalization and stealing of diesel from the site. And quite a number of these factors that we face today, which has made the cost of providing services extremely expensive. And therefore, tariff is one, but other elements that makes up for good operating environment are the variables that need to be considered. That's why we're saying that stakeholders have to do something now. With all the problems in hand and what we are seeing, it will not attract the needed investments in the sector. That's why we're crying that more or less getting into a critical unit where now, if something is not done, the timing again may not be right. Yeah.
So just before we get to what you think should be done, you did mention multiple taxation. Could you give us an example? Do you have the number of taxes, and perhaps agencies that are after these taxes?
Today, we face about 54 different taxes and levies across the country, 54. And this goes across federal government agencies, state agencies, local government agencies, and other groups of people that consider themselves into revenue enforcement agents that with a view to raising IGR. Unfortunately, while the federal government talks about providing an enabling environment, it's not the same as the subnationals. Also, the behavior of some of the agencies, even at the federal level, is also at variance with what the government is saying. And so, unless these issues are addressed holistically, government must pay specific attention to our sector. 54 taxes and levies is too much for one sector. Enforcement of collection is a problem. You wake up in the morning, some guys have gone to seal up site in the name of IGR. By evening, a number of staff are arrested and their tools are seized because an IGR is expected from the company and all that. And this just makes very hostile operating environment, and no one is paying attention. Just last week, we had a meeting with a group of people calling themselves now the Association of Telecom Landlord Owners. These are people that group now who come together in a group to say they form an association as landlords of telecom infrastructure. And they try to also set some rates and band within which operators have to either lease a site, rent a site, or pay a premium for the annual renewal of site that they lease. And so that's just an example of some of the things we face. In a few states, we have charges like affluent discharge, environmental levy, community development levy, education levy, capital investment levy that are charged by different state governments as an example of part of the things that we are facing. And so with this multiplicity of collection, taxes, collection and compliance, and fulfillment of those obligations on the part of the operators is extremely difficult and just makes very hostile operating environment. So the issue of tariff is one, but the operating environment is another thing that government must address. And we think that for us to have investment, significant investment required to run and drive the sector and keep it sustainable, government needs to do a lot in terms of policy issues, regulatory issues, safety and protection of our infrastructure and people who do work for us, and as well as the right tariff.
Yeah, so I do know that the Taiwo Idele committee, they have some proposed reforms, which is supposed to streamline, the number of taxes especially. But you do have a regulator too that's supposed to be looking after your affairs. Do you have conversations in these areas with your regulator?
We do, and our regulator is quite aware about the challenges that we face. But they regulate telecoms. They don't regulate revenue collection agents. So those who are in charge of managing the revenue agencies are those who should address this matter. Again, we're aware about the Presidential Committee on Tax Reform, but the fact remains that we've heard more of this on radio and on television than in real life. So we haven't seen the outcome of the work of that committee, and I think the time is now. If there has been some relief for the industry, the time is now, and we must begin to see those reliefs in place.
What relief do you think would be very essential and effective at this time?
Say again, please.
What kind of relief do you think would be very essential and effective at this time?
First is the elimination of barriers to the right operating environment, protection of our infrastructure as critical national infrastructure, repairing our tariff as it stands today is not sustainable, and providing a general enabling environment for the sector to work and to thrive. Otherwise, we risk a situation where services become impacted. Providers may not be able to provide service at all times and in all places where the challenges become extremely high.
Yeah, and I believe you also have the issue of non-state actors also in this chain of challenges that you face.
Well, we also have the issue of the USSD debt, which is what we've been talking about. The debt is growing, stands today at over 200 billion naira. We're concerned that also remains a sour point for us as an industry. If you have that injection to the sector today, it will do something in the scheme of things. So these are many more issues that are at hand, and they need to be addressed. Yesterday, the stakeholders have spoken. They've spoken very clearly. Our regulators are aware about these issues. They are doing all that they can within means, but I think they also need to be assisted. Government needs to have clear understanding about the problems that we face as a sector and address them one by one. There is no industry that is immune against failure. There is no industry that is so successful. If the policies are not right, it's only a matter of time before something will happen. So we think as stakeholders that the industry is in a very critical situation, and the time is now that government has to do something. Our government has to own this problem along with us and has to do something to address the issues faced by the sector. We are too critical to the survival of the economy that we can't allow things to go in the downward spiral. It will be too dangerous for us as an economy. Yep.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, communication, telecommunication, is an important. But just before we let you go, Engineer Adebayo, the issue of network. The quality of network these days has been a worry. I know then in the midst of the protests, there were allegations or suspicions that, perhaps it was because of the protest. But I mean, the quality of service hasn't been the same since then till now. I wonder what's happening.
It's one and the same. We're talking about the same thing. You can't have good quality of services if you don't have the right investment in the sector. Systems are becoming of age. Number of equipment are going out of service because of the nearing end of life. And so availability is becoming a challenge. And again, it speaks to what we're talking about. So I think the concern from here is it can be the beginning of a longer problem, of a bigger problem, if the issues are not addressed. You don't want to come to a point where you start having ration service available. You start having services at a place in the morning, not available in the afternoon in the same place and all that. So we need to address these issues. Quality of service, as we are seeing, I think is beginning to see, we're beginning to see the problems of a bigger issue in the industry, which has to be addressed. So I can't say to you that it will go away, because if people are not investing, systems are not being fine-tuned, systems are not being upgraded, operators can't pay the obligations as due, it will be very difficult to provide good quality service. It is not a reason, but it's a cause actually.
Well, sadly so, Engineer Gbenga Adebayo, but we do hope that, I mean, as you said, and since your regulator is aware, that at least they can represent the welfare of the sector and speak on it. The Chairman, Association of Licensed Telecoms Operators of Nigeria, ALTON, thank you so much, Engineer Gbenga Adebayo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.